Thank you all very much. For those of you I haven't met, I'm Bella Gerlich. I'm the Dean of Libraries here. It's a great pleasure to welcome you to the 2013 Authors Reception. We have, as usual, outstanding authors, as we do every year to honor. And so we're going to go ahead and get started with the program. And let me introduce to you our Chancellor, Brian Rogers.
Well, thank you, Dean Gerlich, and thank you all for coming today. It's always a pleasure for me to be able to recognize the authors from the University of Alaska Fairbanks over the last year. Today, 19 books with 23 authors. As always, a diverse range of disciplines, and really just a small sampling of the books and the research and creative works produced here at the University of Alaska Fairbanks. And as we go through them today, you'll be introduced to historical figures and figures who made history. We'll travel to the tops of all 3 poles, yes, 3, to the grasses of the plains, the oceans. We'll talk of love, found in the romance of frontier and story, the heartbeat of poetry, cultural treasures, and language that become accessible through translations, dictionaries, and maps. Parents and teachers will benefit from a curriculum guide, a manual for oyster farmers, and even a book about coal and peat fires. And on the display behind me are a few tablets as well, because some of these books are available electronically with enhanced technologies embedded. We find it interesting as a publishing form, we've gone from clay tablets to book, and now back to tablets again. Last year we started a new tradition to the Authors Reception, honoring an author with a close tie to UAF. Last year's recipient was UAF alum Mary Albanese. This year, we'll honor a former UAF faculty member, former UA statewide and UAF and UAA director, former UAA faculty member, current emeritus, one who holds an honorary doctorate from the University of Alaska Anchorage, state senator, Constitutional Convention delegate. Our honoree will be Vic Fisher, and that whole litany I just gave you is only about a third of the book. The other 2/3 ranges from Bolsheviks to Gandhi, includes both Eleanor and Franklin D. Roosevelt. It's a fascinating story from Russia with love. And it's my great pleasure to present to my good friend Vic Fisher today's honoree, and a congratulations for the book From Russia with Love. And so Vic, from us with love.
Thank you all.
And Vic's book was co-written with Charles Wolforth, and we also want to recognize Charles for his participation, and we have a similar history. And now I'll turn to Bella for the rest of our honorees. Thank you.
First up, we have Catherine Arndt.
Hola, ¿cómo está usted? Gracias, bien, gracias. That is about all I know of another language. I know a few Finnish words, but my mom, I ended up putting a bar of soap in my mouth, so I don't say those no more. But people who can speak another language, I'm impressed with. I have great respect for people who can speak more than one language. And it's with great pride and an honor of mine to introduce one of Rasmussen's very own assistant professors who is bilingual. Not only can this lovely lady speak English and Russian, she can read it, write it, and more importantly, comprehend both languages. Ms. Catherine Arndt co-translated this book. Can you help me pronounce the title?
Catalog of collections from the Queen's Commons.
Like I said, I'm lucky I can even speak English. This bounded treasure allowed me to enjoy the Peter the Great Museum in my own living room. I read about Alaskan artifacts and their stories, what we collected from, that were collected from in the 17 and 1800s. This wonderful masterpiece of vivid pictures that literally jump off their pages along with history and translated Russian stories about the Kodiak Aleut, their artifacts, what they were made of, and the meanings behind them really bring this museum in a book to life. And I hope you all take the time to check it out. I mean, these pictures just, they bounce right off the pages. So it was a pure joy and a pleasure to thumb through this. Thank you.
For our University of Alaska Press that did such a wonderful job of putting out this book. It's absolutely a beautiful book.
Thank you. Next up, we have Bill Schneider, and he'll be presenting Karen Brewster. Karen?
Thank you. It's my pleasure to introduce Karen Brewster's book, Boots, Bikes, and Bombers, Adventures of an Alaskan Conservationist, Ginny Hill Wood, and it's particularly timely. This is number 5 in the oral biography series that University of Alaska Press has produced. And this book is full of adventure, but even more than that, it's a look at Fairbanks just after World War II. It's a close look at the early years of the conservation movement. It's a look at the history of Camp Denali and the many, many people who made their way through there and became important in our lives today. Combining oral history with other primary source research, this is a major treasure, and I think it's the finest of the oral biography series. So please give a hand to Karen Brewster.
Thank you. Now we have Kat Williams, and she will present to Courtney Carruthers, Catherine Chambers, Keith Criddle, Paula Kohlenberg, and Emily Springer.
You would think the nervousness, you'd think I'd be calmed down by now. Especially this book here, Fishing in Alaska. The two just go together hand in hand. And this book, Fishing People of the North, the title really caught my eye. My honeymoon was in Chitina, Alaska, so if that tells you anything about me and fishing. So I've seen the changes over the years from when Uncle Sam stationed me up here in the early 90s to just last summer, how the change in fishing has affected so many people. And I was kind of curious in what they had to say. Fishing People of the North, cultures, economies, and management responding to change. And the one thing that caught my eye was management responding to change. I was reading this book, and I would grab it and mute the TV, and I was like, Troy, did you know this? So, I was really interested about this. I wasn't for sure how it would be with scientific, or if I'd be able to understand it a whole lot, but actually it's really well written, and it was really nice to see and read about the different stories from Norway, Northwest Russia, Japan, Canada, in Alaska, from Barrow to Savunga. I guess I wouldn't have thought about Barrow fishing, I think Valdez and Homer. So a lot of really interesting information in here about the Sheriff of the Sea, aka the Arctic Council, and the UN Law of the Sea. I read about the list of community capital indicators, variables, and data source. They were actually quite interesting. So, great book. I love how you guys combine the 19 different papers. There's even, I didn't get finished unfortunately, but I will. There's talking about Hawaii and the different communities, and how local fishermen adapt to the various changes. And equally important is how do they view their futures as fishermen. So I enjoyed it. I learned a lot. So I'm glad I picked up this handy little title. So thank you.
Thank you so much.
Now we have Elise Jordan, and she'll be introducing Dolly Garza.
Over the course of the past 15 years, there has been a concerted effort by Indigenous people around the world to recognize their historical chasm, reconcile their historical chasms that has existed between their knowledge systems that they have developed to sustain themselves for a millennium, and ways of knowing that have emerged under the banner of Western science. Dr. Garza has highlighted Alaskan Native life by providing a curriculum that addresses fishery science, rollerblade science, ecology, and ecosystems. Alaskan Native people have taken an active part in documenting and articulating their worldviews, particularly their educational process, and their traditions passed from generation to generation. The curriculum guide provides practical teaching lessons, for instance, making traditional halibut hooks and drums. The curriculum handbook includes a CD from Common Knowledge radio series that introduces the reader to the creative potential of multiple knowledge systems in their understanding. And is Dr. Garza here?
Thank you. I noticed you were using an iPad for that. Up next is Rose Barenza, and she'll be introducing Joanne Hensey.
I'm happy to introduce this book written by my friend and colleague in the Alaskan Polar Regions collection, Joanne Hensey, along with Quentin Skinner, Stony Wright, Robert Hensey, and Sandra Wyman wrote, and as you can see, a field guide to Alaska grasses. As Joanne points out to people in Alaska, this book is about the genus Polacea, not the good stuff. A lot of people apparently don't. Looking at this book, I was surprised to find out how much there is to know about grasses in Alaska. We all know what grass is, what it looks like, but if you take a look at this, I think you'll be surprised at the differences. There's a lot of similarities, a lot of differences, and this book will be a standard, I believe, for years to come, especially useful to researchers and students as plant regimes change due to introduced species and climate change. 167 texts are covered. Each record includes a detailed description of distinguishing features, distribution maps, and photographs, often including one showing the grass in its natural location. It includes resources for further study, a map of the ecoregions of Alaska, clear photographs of the different parts of the grasses, taxonomic keys, a glossary, and a species index. The book is very well done. It's beautiful to look at. It's very well put together on good paper. It should last a long time. But for those who prefer their books on computer, the entire book is available on a website, easily found with a Google search on the terms Field Guide to Alaska Grasses. It's the first one that shows up. And I really recommend anyone with any interest in botany or botany, to take a look at it. And I've been encouraging Joanne to look at doing one for Siberia. So please come up and take a look, and thank you.
So up next, we have Stacy Baldridge, and she will be introducing Gary Holton, James Kari, and Brett Parks.
I'm presenting Lower Tanana Athabascan Place Names, compiled by James Carey with mapping by Gary Holton and Brett Parks. It was reviewed by Robert Charley, a Tanana Athabascan elder. He also provides the foreword, which is rich in place names and the history of the Lower Tanana people's traditional lands. Published by the Alaska Native Language Center in 2012, this little 96-page gem includes 3 wall maps, color photos, and 1,087 place names. Lower Tanana is just the second Alaska Native language to have a full inventory of place names mapped on GIS software. Ahtna was the first. But work has been conducted for over 40 years on Lower Tanana place names, and this is the most complete publication of all recorded Lower Tanana place names. The Lower Tanana language is divided into 3 dialects, the Chena, Mintonina, and Toklat dialects, and these are all talked about in here. And I'm by no means a language worker. I work as an archivist among them at the Alaska Native Language Archive, and the book does an excellent job at explaining how place names are gathered, the ways in which people classified the landscape to make it learnable and memorizable, and explains place name documentation, which is often a very complex subject in an easily digestible manner. Many of the place names in the book are right here under our feet, like College Hill, Dead Man's Slough, Smith Lake, Belane Lake, and others. It's fun to just skim through the place names and read what they are called in Lower Tanana. The book is not the end of place name mapping for Lower Tanana, rather it is an ongoing project. Other further place name projects and revisions are already being planned with various organizations. Carrie suggests reciting the place names as we travel through the Tanana Valley. I might just try it. Thank you.
We now have Robin Andrews, and she'll be introducing Falk Houghton.
Protection of the Three Poles, editor and contributing author, Falk Houghton. I met Dr. Hutman 9 years ago when I took his landscape ecology class. It's a great class, and the spatial thinking it encourages is very empowering. As a professor, Falk can be a little intense for some people. I've been known to comment that he's a little hardcore, meaning that he's academically rigorous and he expects a lot from his students. But before reading his book, I'd never really read anything that wasn't technical, anything that was positional or management oriented. From reading his chapters, it's clear that Falk is intensely passionate about solving the world's environmental and social problems, especially those occurring at the Three Poles. If you're not familiar with the Three Poles concept, and I admit I was not, it includes the North Pole, the South Pole, as well as a third pole in the Hindu Kush Himalaya region. Ecologically, the three poles group together because they contain large volumes of ice and snow, and hence fresh water. And because they are disproportionately affected by global warming. From a human perspective, the third pole may be of particular concern because much of the world's population lives in the drainages of the glacial-fed rivers originating from the Tibetan Plateau. I enjoyed reading the book, but it made me feel a little uncomfortable. But frankly, I think that was what was supposed to happen. It was supposed to break our complacency. If you're looking for a soft science book that'll make you feel good about being a human being, this is not that book. For that, I would suggest The Bonobo and the Atheist by Franz Reuel. This hard science book will make you worry about food and water resources in Asia. It'll make you worry about whether you should be ordering the Chilean sea bass. If your grandchildren will live in a world with few walruses, greatly diminished seabirds, and where polar fairs may only exist in the zoo. It'll make you think about the quality of science you produce or read, and the importance of open access data, another subject on which Dr. Hupman is very passionate. I often am amazed by how much work some of the people in the sciences can produce, and Falk is one of those people. I swear he gets more done before lunch than I can accomplish in a month. Thank you, Dr. Hupman.
Up next, we have Kathy Arndt, and she'll be presenting Stephen Jacobson.
Today we're honoring Stephen Jacobson, Professor Emeritus of Yupik Eskimo, for publication of a new and greatly expanded edition of his Yupik Eskimo Dictionary. Dictionary entries include word definitions, information on dialects, and sentence examples demonstrating word usage. Appendices include terms for different times of the year, kinship terms, and terms for the various parts of a kayak, a dog sled, an old-style semi-subterranean house, and a traditional parka. There are also lists of loanwords from various languages, an extensive bibliography, and an English to Yupik index. The dictionary is a valuable reference work not only for speakers and learners of the Yupik language, but for anyone interested in Yupik culture and lifeways.
Thank you.
Next, we have Leslie McCartney, and she'll be presenting Judith Kleinfeld.
I'd like to encourage you all to read The Frontier Romance by Judith Kleinfeld. In this fascinating book, Judith analyzes life narrative stories of several Alaskans through two simultaneous lenses. The first is through the lens of narrative psychology, which emphasizes lived meaning and how people use narrative to create a sense of self. The second is through what Judith calls the frontier romance, or the west of the imagination lens. Here, life is uncomplicated, population is sparse, and those who are found living there are noble, distinctive individuals, personified by mountain men, trappers, cowboys, and pioneers. This imaginary frontier is peppered with emotional and culturally shared symbols, such as the log cabin in the lone woods. I so enjoyed how Judith built upon the ideas of frontier as put forth by Frederick Jackson Turner in his 1893 essay. So it's really interesting to see how you build upon those ideas. In using life stories, Judith explores and vividly describes how many people came to Alaska to what they viewed as the last frontier, to live as mountain men, pioneer women, homesteaders, or to seek a spiritual oneness with the wilderness, or for others, how they used the last frontier as a mask to hide behind. For all those she interviewed, the frontier romance was part of their own personal narrative. It gave them strength to leave what was familiar, gave them strength to take risks, and to live out the trials of their newfound lives. What Judith discovered was that people's personal narratives of romantic illusion soon became inseparable from their reality. She concludes that the stories of those Alaskans who live within the frontier narrative, literally as mountain men or pioneer women or pilgrims, are still very important to all of us. They serve to reassure the rest of American society that the collective American narrative is indeed still alive and well. I'd encourage you to read this book. Thank you.
Next, we have Angie Schmidt, and she'll be presenting Carolyn Kramers.
Hello, I'm very pleased today to present Carolyn Kramer's latest work. It's a book of poems titled Upriver. This collection is a sequel to her first book of poetry, Place of the Pretend People, Gifts from a Yupik Eskimo Village, published in 1996. Kramers writes literary nonfiction and poetry. Her essays and poems have appeared on public radio and in numerous journals, magazines, and anthologies. Today she's a dedicated teacher here at UAF. Kramers originally moved to Alaska to teach music and English in the village of Tununuk, which is located on Nelson Island in southwest Alaska. and which inspired her first book of poetry, to which this book is sequel. As a film archivist, I spend most of every day looking at moving picture images. And what I most appreciate about Carolyn Kramer's work is her ability to convey vivid and very pointed imagery through her poetry. Her imagery is in fact in some ways better than photographs and better than moving pictures. Because her written words, to me, are a little bit like scratch and sniff poetry. She has an ability not only to draw a really vivid picture in the reader's mind, but also to convey a sense of sound and sense and the feelings that one would get from different events and locations. Carolyn Cremers writes that everyone recognizes the new teacher in town, even in blizzards, even in fog, or on a night with no moon, because of her long blue legs. She writes that the new students smell comfortable, like fish, sweat, sleep, or like soap fresh from the laundromat where showers cost 6 quarters. She writes of a meal on the trap line and says that hot dogs tucked into boiling macaroni water swell like shaved pink poodles. That's my favorite. And she writes that nobody reads poems anymore, the critics say. Well, I've witnessed evidence to the contrary, and I would agree with that statement. So please join me in thanking Carolyn Kramers for her latest work, Upriver.
Playing the part of Ann Christie is me, and had to couldn't attend today. So I am going to present Gordon Cruz. Is Gordon here? Yep, okay. Well, the Global Progress in Ecosystem-Based Fisheries Management is the proceedings of the 26th Lowell Wakefield Fisheries Symposium, sponsored and coordinated by the Alaska Sea Grant, which published the proceedings online. The proceedings was edited by Gordon, UAF Professor of Fisheries based in Juneau, together with 6 colleagues in fisheries research. The symposium was based on 4 themes in relation to ecosystem-based fisheries management: regional applications, analytical tools and evaluation, human dimensions, case studies and practical solutions. 108 participants from 19 countries listened to 61 presentations covering these themes. The proceedings itself consists of 18 peer-reviewed papers representing the work of approximately 70 researchers. Next we have Dennis Moser, and he'll be presenting Yelena. Thank you.
I wish I'd had this book way too many years ago as an undergraduate in anthropology, because when I discovered Saluting Aaron Gurevich, I found someone who was thinking about things that I really wish I'd had someone else to talk to about these. And as I was reading through this, it was clear that this is something of a labor of love for Yelena to bring together the remembrances, the stories, the essays that were inspired by Aaron Gurevich. And one of the fascinating things about the book, and I encourage you to come up and take a closer look at it, Gurevich was noted as a Russian medievalist. And the book designer took that to heart, because we have a little illuminated manuscript illustration of him at his desk. I encourage you to come and see this work of Yelena Matisevich's.
Tall people. Next we have Jeanette Altman, and she'll be presenting Patricia Merritt.
Thank you. It's my great pleasure to introduce this book, Constructive Guidance and Discipline, Birth to Age 8. It was my great regret that my youngest child is 9 years old and probably none of this stuff applies to him anymore. But it really is, this book is actually it's for educators, both novice and experienced educators. But as a parent, I found a lot of the wisdom in this book to be something of that instruction book I always wish would have come with my children when they arrived. So this is the 6th edition. The authors illustrate time-tested principles and recommendations for educators in helping children to become caring, responsible, and confident people. Written for both novice and experienced educators, this book offers a consistent view on both guidance and discipline, explaining why rewards can be as damaging as punishment. The text contains many engaging examples of these situations, infants through primary school. One that I remember particularly was a story about some birthday invitations that got passed out to only a few kids in the class, and the educator had the wisdom to regroup and talk and share about an experience where they felt left out and got feedback from the rest of the kids and turned it into a learning experience. Special challenges are also highlighted in this book, including those stemming from children with special needs, learning disabilities, and risk factors due to poverty, violence, or loss. This work has become a celebrated practical resource, focusing on developmental theory and constructivism. It's an insightful read, and it really teaches educators the benefits of treating the root causes of the behavior and highlighting the uniqueness of every child. Thank you.
I'd like to also acknowledge the Bunnell House that has many illustrations from their children and their practice in this book, and Todd Paris, who took some of those photos for us.
Next we have Flora Gabrowski. Flora will be introducing a new, help me say this, please. Thank you.
It gives me great pleasure to return to this event to re-present Anupma Prakash, co-editor of Coal and Peat Fires, A Global Perspective, this time with Volume 2 of a planned 4-volume work. Now, these are not the cozy coal fires I grew up with in our living room, nor the peat fires still warming pubs in Scotland and Ireland. These are catastrophic fires, sometimes spontaneous, sometimes started by lightning, forest fires, or human activities such as land clearing, cigarette smoking, burning trash, campfires, and my favorite, illicit stills, or coal mine related incidents. Now, Anupma has just returned from Denver, I learned this morning, where, not surprising, she attracted the attention of Bernie Carl, our Bernie Carl, who gave a presentation at the same meeting. Now that Bernie has heard of this, he, of course, sees phenomenal energy potential in this phenomenon, and he's already planning how to make use of this burning hot research. Stay tuned for Volume 3.
So I'm going to present a book, The Alaska Oyster Growers Manual, 4th edition by Ray Roland. The 4th edition of the Alaska Oyster Growers Manual is co-authored by Ray Roland, Roger Painter, and Glenn Haight. Ray Roland is a faculty member with Alaska Sea Grants Marine Advisory Program. In the introduction to the book, Painter, himself an oyster grower, talks about the promise of oyster growing as a small business in coastal communities, from Dixon Entrance to Cook Inlet, and the need for a new manual pulling together all the information for successful oyster growing, including oyster biology, cultural methods, and navigating the permitting process. The manual, published by Alaska Sea Grant, is freely available online, so anyone who would like to look into oyster growing can have a head start. I encourage you all to give that a try when you're on the coast. Okay, I get the last one too. And finally, she gave me one that had a little funny line in it. So I'm going to present James Strong, Fishing for Pollock in a Sea of Change, a history and analysis of the Bering Sea pollock fishery. Have you ever eaten a McDonald's fish sandwich or fish McBites? If you have, then you've probably eaten Alaskan pollock. If you would like to learn more about Alaskan pollock, then you could read Fishing for Pollock in a Sea of Change, a history and analysis of the Bering Sea fishery by James Strong and Keith Riddle and published by Alaska Sea Grant. This book describes the history of the Bering Sea pollock fishery and its management from World War II to the present. Anecdotes from fishermen and fishery managers and numerous graphs and color photos help tell the story of why the pollock fishery is a success and how close it came to being an economic disaster. I thought you might enjoy James' thanks to his wife Miranda. Your sincere attempt to act interested in pollock during my late nights of writing was very much appreciated. So that reaches the end of all of our authors that we had to present to you today. So I'd like to give a round of applause. I also want to thank the library faculty and staff who presented and who also made this event possible and all their hard work, and the Chancellor's office. Thank you very much. So please enjoy the rest of the refreshments and join us at 6 p.m. in the Salisbury Theater for a lecture and book signing by tonight's guest, Vic Fisher. Thank you all for coming.
Well spoken, Chris.
I read the whole book, man.